Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. Have a pretty good stream set up for today. Going to let some people filter in as we get ready. But as always, I'm being joined by American Ostrakon. Thanks for coming on again, man.
Yeah, good to be here, Auron.
And of course, Ostrakon does have his Twitter down there, so if you want to follow him, you can. We had a big Twitter purge here yet again. I'm starting to wonder if, and don't worry, we're not going to make like Twitter the key conversation here, but just while we're letting people wander into the stream, I'm starting to wonder at their strategy because it looks like they're just purging like a percentage of people, with wrong think on Twitter now. I can't even do a rhyme or reason. Like it's no longer feels like they have any specific okay, this person has violated, the requirements type necessity. It's just, it feels like it's time to hit X number of accounts and, make a show or a flex. And that's what's happening. But that said, all right, guys. So our stream today is about a couple different things. We're going to be focusing on the military today and a number of different aspects of that. Ostrakon's always a knowledgeable person on that. And so we wanted to start out today with, of course, Biden's attack on Syria this week. It looks like around, sometime Friday, the Pentagon confirmed that Biden had done his first airstrike in Syria, which I don't think should really have been a shock to anybody. As Ostrakon was pointing out today, we really, before we went live, we really want to avoid falling into the trap of being surprised by this kind of thing, or, going, oh, the hypocrisy, because we know they don't care. We know that's not going to be a big deal. But I do think it is useful, and, it is instructive for some of the people who were trying to justify that Biden vote to see exactly what was coming down the pipe. But Ostrakon, were you surprised at all that this ended up, happening so early in the administration?
No, I mean this has been this last election has been predominantly focused on internal politics, right? Politics within the United States, and I feel like we've really lost focus. The everyday person is lost focused on any sort of interest in international politics, which this definitely falls under. International. This is military action falls under foreign policy on the most extreme end of it, right? You'd have on one end, you'd have peaceful relations with a nation, and then I guess the most extreme end on the other end would be all out war. And this definitely leans more towards the war side of the house, although it's not open conflict between countries. I think it's something that they were that's just kind of business as normal in ensuring American hegemony with it throughout the Middle East, and it's also just a message to anyone who would think that they could continue to influence U.S. politics in a way that they deem not appropriate. It's like I said, business is normal. I'm not surprised by any of this, and I'm not surprised by how quickly they got started with it. They can use it kind of as a litmus test to see the reaction of the American people, and I don't really think there's much of a reaction at all.
Yeah, I think other than the people who are trying to go, oh, look, hey, we told you this was going to happen, I don't think the wider populace cares. I think the only time you really see any kind of foreign affairs really impact American politics is only when they seem reflective of them. I think the last thing I think that really kind of pierced the American consciousness as a political event outside of our borders was maybe Brexit. And I think in many ways that's because A, Britain is so close an ally, and B, because it seemed to so much mirror kind of the domestic politics happening here, and the same attitudes that were leading to Trump were leading to Brexit. And so many people felt that they kind of were intertwined.
Yeah, you had some obvious compare and contrast between Brexit and the situation in the United States. And so I think that's why it definitely picked up more steam as an interest to the American people. But something like this, I mean, we've been in conflicts in Central Asia and the Middle East for 20 plus years now. I mean, we had this conversation our very first talk. A friend of mine once told me, America's not at war. The army's at war, or the military's at war, but America was, he said, at the mall. Obviously, that's not a thing anymore. But the groundwork has been laid a long time ago to allow military action to take place in such a way that it is. It's not that it's not reported to the American people, but we've compartmentalized our military to such an extent that it really does not have much of an impact on the population, which is bad. This is not the way it should be. If you're going to have conflict as a nation, the people of that nation should have a stake in it, but they don't.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to be talking more and more about the actions that the Biden administration is using to even further kind of wedge the military away from the American people and vice versa. But before we do that, I do want to talk a little bit about what this means. Obviously we have a lot of Biden supporters who are scrambling, to kind of justify what's happening, especially after it came out that Biden had opened up basically like detention camps for illegal immigrant children, or basically had rebranded them, and so they're no longer kids in cages; they're kids in overflow facilities with bars on the windows, and so we're seeing a lot of scrambling on the left, and again, we shouldn't expect pointing and saying hypocrite isn't going to win you any battles. It's not going to get a lot of converts. It has a few more people scratching their head. It has a few more people saying, okay, I have a harder time justifying this next time, but not enough probably to make a difference in the end.
Now that they've established themselves, they can afford to infight.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, once you no longer have to take care of those enemies, then it's just about listing priorities, and they can start sidelining some of those people who were expressing those concerns. The joke was going, all the memes were being converted from, hey, that country looks like it needs some freedom, to, hey, look, that country it looks like it needs some diversity, right? Like I saw you ever seen the one where they're all ready to breach the door and it's like, knock, knock, here comes freedom. And they switched over to like, knock, knock, here comes diversity,
I think the individual on the other side of that door cares very little about the reason why the door is being busted open, merely that it is.
I mean, they're about to get very diversified, to be clear.
Yes.
But yeah, so yeah, you're getting a lot of good memes out of it. The bomber, repainted with a Black Lives Matter flag, and the Babylon Bee had a absolutely great article where it's like houses in Syria paint the transgender flag over your doorstep, like over the
to keep the yes
pass over this house.
Yeah, war crimes are funny.
Yeah, I mean, well, and the great thing is, we talked about this before, in your previous appearances when we talked about the military. You had Trump, basically ordering multiple generals. So like, okay, we need to draw down these engagements. We need to reduce the troops in these areas. And basically, as it became clear that Trump was on his way out, they just started saying things like, yeah, we just lied to him and kept the troop numbers where they were. Right. So the idea that, we talk a lot on this channel about how formal power is not what we think it is. And, power is not vested in the areas that we think it is with the Constitution, and really nothing is more apparent, in that fact that Trump, who, to be fair, ordered strikes in Syria too. So let's not pretend like that's not the case. But nothing could be clearer about that fact or make that fact more clear than that he was trying to draw down and he was trying to reduce these troop numbers. The generals and the people in charge were lying to him the whole time, saying they were doing this while having no intention of following the orders of the commander-in-chief, and then are ready to gear right back up as soon as they have an establishment guy back in the White House.
Which they fully expected for him to win, which is not surprising, based upon what we've discussed and what we've read. It was pretty much I mean, I don't think they ever expected Trump to win the first time around. It was always seen of as it was a miscalculation, and it was seen of as a non-issue. And now they've gone back to business as normal, where they can, they can be at home, they can be pushing their social agenda and the liberalization of America, and while overseas maintaining the hegemony of U.S. power. And doing it in such a way that the American people have no vested interest in the outcome.
Yeah, and that's really the key, right? Like, as long as there's never going to be any sacrifice at home, and especially with everything that's going on domestically, there's no way anyone's going to be focusing on this. No one's going to make this a point of contention. People are still sitting around waiting for that Joe Biden check. We don't have money for that, but we don't have the ability to handle that. Bernie Sanders has given up on the $15 minimum wage, but the one thing they can get done is the bombing of Syria. That's the one priority that can definitely get pushed to the forefront. And so it's really easy to play the shell game. They're good at. They've been doing it for a long time. Obviously, it worked better when they could switch with the party. Like you said, Trump was never supposed to get in. You're supposed to hand over rule of the outer party to someone like Jeb Bush, who could be controlled opposition. I have plenty of problems with Trump, but one thing you can't say about Trump is he really was not controlled opposition. And you can tell from the way they treated him.
He was an outsider.
Yeah,
very much so.
Yeah, he was absolutely doing things he was not supposed to do. He was questioning narratives he was not supposed to question, making decisions that no one is allowed to make, touching those third rails, and doing it rather loudly. And even though he did it, haphazardly and sloppily and wasted a lot of time and power, he very clearly, even just his kind of meandering way of threatening power was enough to send them into, this wide-scale panic, enough to where they fortified the election to make sure that he just couldn't do it again. So
for what essentially wasn't even politically that big of a threat, which is impressive.
Yeah, I mean, Trump's greatest achievement was a tax cut, right? Like that was, the most standard of GOP things was his greatest achievement. So it really was about the class and type of people that Trump represented. Trump represented kind of the working poor, and he represented kind of the aspiring kulaks who were not part of basically the bureaucratic salt mines. Like he was representing boat dealers and plumbers, and not people with gender studies degrees and foreign labor. And so it really was less about what his policies were doing to actively threaten them, but what the narrative of someone like him being able to offer power to people and access to people would mean down the road for kind of the oligarchy.
Yep, I agree.
So the thing we really wanted to talk about this week, we wanted to get to Syria because that's definitely topical, and it's something a lot that had a lot of people saying, okay, obviously this is where the Biden administration is going, but it ties directly into our main topic, which was, kind of the developing situation of loyalty checks inside the military. Now, we've talked before about how, kind of after the events of January 6th leading up to the inauguration, there was a big push, especially inside the National Guard, that was going to be guarding Washington, D.C., during the Biden inauguration, to make sure that there were these loyalty checks. They were going to be screening the backgrounds of the soldiers involved. They were going to be making sure that nobody had any political leanings that might jeopardize, the security of the Biden administration during this. But I think we all saw, anybody who's honest, anybody who's not completely trapped by the media narrative, knew that it was not going to stop there. Knew that this was going to move to a wider expansion of kind of culling of loyalty inside the United States military. And we both think that's kind of heading to a dangerous place. And so I just wanted to set the table for you there, Ostrakon. I know you've been looking deeper into what's been going on with kind of the purging and the loyalty checks inside the military and how that's developing.
So, yes. So, I mean, this is kind of the culmination of a lot of what we've talked about, where post World War II, you have the United States military being separated from the population of the United States. I think first unintentionally for practical reasons, and then it was noticed as an opportunity to have people in the military as a separate caste or as a separate organization that was not directly tied and did not directly represent the people of the United States. So what we've run into at this point, after many years through such physical means as base relocation and the creation of mega bases far out of the view of the public eye, and the reduction of where people from the military recruited to very specific populations, which we've talked about, mostly either from cities or from the South, is really the two major drawing places for the military. So you have your relatively your underclass or your financially distressed people who are joining the military to get out of their situation. And then on the other hand, you have people in the military who come from a military background in their family or have a military legacy in their family. And statistically, if you have members of your family who were in the military, you are much more likely to join the military. And that's what happened to me. I had quite a few family members who were either in the military or was connected to the military in some way or another. Okay, so you have that. But the problem with that is those two groups have very different reasons for serving in the military. One is really to increase their economic and social standing, and the others are doing it out of a sense of loyalty and connection to the United States. And there is a lot of overlap in there. There's no one individual who is all one and all the other. Just because you come from a particular background does not mean you have you're not doing it for the right reasons, let's say. But as a result, you've kind of got these two major groups in the military. One, as they call it, they're concerned about white people in the military, and then there's everyone else. And so what you've run into is there's this concern by the cathedral about its hold on the castle. Is that's how I see it anyway. It's a concern that there is a large group of people who have access to the skills, the training, and the equipment that don't hold the same ideals as the people that they are working for. And that's a concern. Now, they've passively been addressing this issue for years through the use of parallel command structures, civilian councils, influence directly from the president, the changing of standards. But what we've seen now is a shift in that. And it's an interesting shift because it's a lot less passive and a lot less behind the scenes. And now it's become a lot more active. I think it first started with, it first came into view with the incident at the Capitol building, where they did have some people who were either ex-military or were in the military who were part of that incident at the Capitol. And so that was used as justification to, in essence, enact loyalty tests in preparation for the Biden administration's coming into power. They did not want individuals who could threaten the inauguration and threaten the new administration, even at a very small level, at an individual level, to be able to do so. And so they implemented loyalty checks through the use of the Criminal Investigation Division, through the use of the FBI, and they have gone and taken people who have already been vetted by the United States government through various means. These people obtain clearances, top secret or secret security clearances, And now they've gone back after they've already vetted these people and now are re-vetting these people based upon, I'm assuming, a new set of parameters. And that is very concerning.
Yeah, so we're looking at a situation, like you said, where we traditionally had a military that was far broader. And of course, especially post World War II, the professionalization of the military has increased, especially after Vietnam, with that being the last time we've seen the draft. The idea that a shared generation wide military experience was going to kind of bind people together doesn't really exist. And so what you see is really the military, since it's being professionalized and is no longer drawing from a wide cross section, is like you said, drawing from those two groups of the kind of the people looking to increase economic status and better themselves, education wise and that kind of thing, taking advantage of the benefits and that the military can provide, and then those that are doing it kind of out of a tradition, a family tradition. And the family tradition types tend to make up the combat arms, if I understand it correctly. Yes,
that is correct. Yeah, I would. That is, yes. Your infantry, your artillery, your tankers, your frontline troops definitely lean more towards heavily in the second group, which is, I think, the concern.
Yeah. So as you say, with those people making up the majority of the military, one of the things that we've talked about, and just so people know the references we're making here, we're talking about, we're using the language of Curtis Yarvin's system, the system in which you have the cathedral, which is kind of the nexus, the collection of decision-making apparatuses, consensus manufacturing apparatus in the United States, your universities, your media outlets, your non-elected bureaucrats inside the government, the State Department, that kind of thing. And they are directing and controlling what we would call the castle, which is the military aspect. Let me see if I can bring that up here. I think I have that diagram ready. But they are directing these people, and traditionally in America, they have had complete control over the castle, right? The castle has been entirely under the control of the cathedral. It's famous, America's famously always been big on civilian control over the military. You don't really have a history of military people coming to great power since basically after World War II. So let me see here real quick. And can you see that diagram okay there, Ostrakon?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, so obviously up here we're talking about the decentralized consensus making apparatus of the cathedral here that we've talked about plenty of times if you've heard this channel before. If you haven't, make sure to watch one of those videos so you're more familiar. But that has always pretty much been in control of this area down here, the castle, right? And the castle is essential because the castle is necessary to maintain power, but it is also fully contained because civilian control of the defense apparatus has been basically constant. You have very few people, like I said, of the military caste rising up to really control the country. They may get to high level management status. They might get especially as the general ranks become more and more about bureaucracy and being educated at Harvard and these type of things, basically being more professional managerial class than warrior. But at the end of the day, they're still never truly given top positions of authority, and so it's very hard for power to leak out of the castle, or at least it has been. And one of the reasons is that while the castle was always there to ensure our power overseas, and should a domestic situation arise, they always had that option. It's never been something that they've leaned on. But the fact that they are culling it in the way that they are right now, and they are searching for ideological enemies, is an issue because, like you said, for such a long time, the castle has been made up, or at least the combat effective parts of the castle have been made up of people who are kind of naturally hostile to those that would kind of be over everybody.
That's correct.
And so, but that's always been manageable because you could just kind of send them overseas, I guess.
Yeah, you can send them overseas, and then when they come back home, you can minimize their effectiveness at any level of government that really matters. Right? It's kind of a send off after you've gone to combat, and thank you for your service. And you can go back and maybe somebody with a combat record might be able to achieve a senator status or a member of the House, or maybe within local politics. But you're really not going to have too many people with much military experience reaching the highest levels of government, and especially not the influential parallel structure of government that isn't the official power structure. It's not going to happen. You're not the same class of people.
Yeah, the person that comes to mind, probably the most recent, would be Dan Crenshaw, right? Would probably be the biggest military service.
And look what they've done to him.
Yeah. Now he's basically entirely on board the neocon agenda, right? Like he couldn't even get on board with Trump. He was hostile to even that. I mean, you've got Tulsi Gabbard, I guess. She was also in the service, but he's probably the person I think of as the first person in many, many years to really kind of rocket up in popularity, at least on some level. And a lot of that looks manufactured, but to me, but at the very least, that like you said, they're certainly not becoming true power players.
No, you'll have your token positions available for those people, but yeah, I sincerely believe that they're never going to really achieve any meaningful power.
Yeah, so the real question, and this is kind of where we're going with all this, is as we see them making this crackdown, obviously, I don't think you purge the military of people who with differing political opinions unless that's going to be necessarily a liability in the future, right?
Which apparently I think they do believe it's going to be a liability in the future.
Right. And don't get me wrong, like you always see some level of that when someone new comes into power. Like, don't get me wrong, people are going to want generals that are loyal to them. Trump wanted that too. But the general intent to hit the wider body of the military, especially in those combat effective areas, I think
that's relatively new.
Yeah, that and pretty ominous. And so the thing we want to look at then is, what is the long-term purpose and the long-term effect? And I think as somebody who's been reading a lot of Oswald Spengler recently, one of the things that he predicts is Caesarism. As you get into these late stage civilizations, you're gonna see the turn towards Caesarism. You're gonna see people looking for that one figure to come in and kind of change everything. Especially as the people have kind of fallen away and lost the animating spirit of the civilization, and they're more and more owned by things like money and intellectualism. They're going to look for someone who's just going to kind of tear it down for them. And you could see the hints of that in kind of what people were hoping Trump would be, right? But I think what we're seeing with the military, while I certainly don't think that Biden is a Caesar figure or anyone probably in the future for the Democrats, I think it does lead us down the path that enables that, because when we start seeing that breaking of loyalty, the loyalty is no longer about service to the country. We already saw the reduction of the force from a wider kind of polis down to a very specific warrior caste, as you've talked about a lot. But now we're seeing that warrior caste culled of anybody who might be disloyal to the current regime, which I think takes us one step down that road, or one more step, I guess.
So I don't think they have to cull everybody, because at the end of the day, they still need men with rifles to do bad things for good reasons, or at least for politically expedient reasons. But I think it's if you remove a few, you're putting the message out there that it's any sort of dissidence of any kind, vocal dissidence is not going to be tolerated.
Yeah, and of course, this coincides with things like the FBI has been saying, our biggest threat is basically dissidents. It's we've seen a lot of different government organizations. It started, of course, with people out of power, and then former secretaries of defense or former directors, and we're seeing it more and more where people who are actively in power, different senators, congressmen, different officials are now, who are actively in power, are now echoing this call of the most dangerous thing we have is insurrectionists and that kind of thing.
That's a really dangerous claim, because you are criminalizing, or you are marginalizing a very large portion of the population.
Yeah, and I don't think that's lost on them. I think that's intentional. And the really amazing thing is, of course, how little actual activity is being used to justify those claims. Now, again, I'm not expecting these people to actually back up their claims with real facts or be bounded by these things, but it is amazing. And I think this all feeds into, we talk a lot about what is manufactured on purpose and what is kind of found advantageous and then amplified. And that's always the question with these lockdowns and these kind of things. But I think one of the things that really helps the cathedral with the lockdowns is the fact that so many people are basically just staring at their phones, the TV screen all day. It's their only way outside. And so whatever gets placed in the news or on TV or, in whatever, becomes their world, because they're not going out and having those normal human interactions that would, keep them from having their minds dominated by the media. But now that media is the only lifeline into the homes of a large number of people inside the country. Just taking one event like the events of January 6th and saying that defines basically half the country becomes something that is kind of more doable than it ever has been. Because don't get me wrong, people have been widely manipulated by the media for a long time. But I think when you're going to make a claim of that magnitude, that like half the country is basically the enemy, like not the enemy in like a culture war sense, but like the enemy, and you're going to make that kind of claim, and your entire basis for that claim is a guy with horns on his head and body paint walking into the Capitol building. You're stretching reality to what you would hope would be the breaking point. And it's not like when I'm talking to people in the real world, it's not like I hear even from the most liberal people, like the hushed tones of, there's a lot of insurrectionists around. But at the same time, this narrative is not going anywhere. It's only being turned up. It's only being amplified. And I think it's only a matter of time before it does permeate a lot of the discussion we see in the real world.
No, I agree. As the if the lockdowns ever end, and we all start going back and socializing with each other, I think one of two things are going to happen. One is people are going to spread the information of which they've received during the lockdown, and it's going to solidify. Or two, people are going to realize how overblown it is, and really the hold of media will lessen. But I really don't think that's the likely outcome.
Yeah, that's the outcome, of course, we all hope for, but you do wonder. I mean, at this point, if you
think people would get tired of it eventually.
Yeah, you would. Like, you think at some point it would exhaust people to the point where, and that's probably what's going to happen more than anything, rather than probably like a strong backlash and a real like battle against this stuff. More than anything, you're probably going to see people just get tired and walk away. And again, this is something Spengler talks about when he talks about kind of the late stage of a declining civilization. It's not that people necessarily rebel against what the civilization is about, or you see this counter wave or counter narrative, so much as it is people just give up. They just get exhausted with the constant barrage and the attempts to manipulate them and the attempts to kind of systematize everything and force everything down people's throats, and they just stop paying attention. And once the momentum completely runs out, then they're just looking for someone to just stop this, just make it stop. And that's where this becomes interesting, because what I think Biden is doing, or whoever's controlling, I mean, Biden isn't doing anything. He's probably lucky if he can open his yogurt cup this morning. But what the people who are running the Biden administration are doing may be setting up the road for someone else that they don't even want to come down the pike, because as they're creating a force that is used to having its loyalty kind of demanded to an individual, that's going to make it far easier for the next person who comes in to kind of demand and expect that from the military, which means that you're going to have a military that is less and less, likely to object to new and different orders coming from those above.
Right. When you strip away, right, it's a unique situation where the military does not pledge an oath to an individual other than, well, the president, but obviously that individual changes. But they don't pledge an oath. The officers don't pledge an oath to the president. They pledge an oath to the Constitution itself. And I mean, it's a small thing, but it's a unique thing, in that it's you're basically pledging yourself to a set of rules and ideals as opposed to any one individual, which is in a lot of ways, a very unique and American thing that they are, I think, unintentionally stripping away when they conduct these loyalty checks and when they tighten their grip on the castle. Right. I think that the fear is that there are going to be individuals or organizations within the military that will perform some sort of action that's against the administration. I mean, you saw how even with the incident at the Capitol building, how all these senators and congressmen and politicians reacted when a few individuals walked in. Right, they're literally cowering, underneath their desks and chairs, which to me says they have a pretty significant concern. I think in their eyes, the military is almost a boogeyman and a necessary evil at best. And they don't really understand it very well. And so as a result, their fear has led them to take precautions to ensure their loyalty. But what they've actually done is they're removing loyalty from an idea and placing loyalty to an individual, which can then be transferred to another individual at a later date. And I don't think that's their intention, but that's the result.
Yeah, so I think there's two really important things there. The fact that they are scared of kind of the military in that way is something I definitely want to hit on. So don't let me forget that. Don't let me forget to circle back around to that. But to pick up on what you just said, I think we can, of course, turn to historical examples for this. You have Rome, and you have people pledging. Your force is is a force of those who can afford to be involved, can afford their own armor, can afford their own weapons, and so they're of a certain class. And so military service is really. I wouldn't say a privilege, but it's something that is seen as an honor and tied to a certain amount of status for the civilization at large, and your loyalty is to that civilization. And then it kind of as you see, a number of different things happen, but a lot of people will point to the kind of the Marian reforms to the Roman military. And kind of you're professionalizing the military, turning it from kind of a citizen military into a professional military. And as you do that, you see the increase of loyalty to an individual. And then, of course, Marius gives way to Sulla, and you start seeing the purges as that civil war goes on. Military units are fighting each other. Obviously, we're not there yet, but you can at least see the buildup of, how having professional units loyal to individuals rather than a population a military drawn from the broader population loyal to the civilization quickly then leads you down the path to Pompey and Caesar and Crassus and everybody we're familiar with from that story, because it quickly becomes who owns what legion when, as opposed to a broader force that is loyal to the civilization as a whole.
I mean, that is, I think, unintentional, but a slow. I don't know. I always say slow, Auron, and then it always ends up being happening much more quickly than we ever predict. So I don't know if slow is really the word to use, but this is the progression we seem to be going upon at some speed.
Was it was one of the communists. It was like Stalin or somebody's like, you have the decades where nothing happens and then the years where decades happen.
And it's becoming more and more like that. And this is right. This isn't even a political discussion of any kind, right? You could have any political framework, and this is still a concern. It does not matter if it's a socialist or a republic, or it doesn't matter what type of political system you use. This push towards from loyalty to state to loyalty to individual is always a concern, and it seems to be a track that we're going down relatively quickly.
Yeah, someone said that's Lenin. So okay, but yeah, thank you. But yeah, I knew it was one of them. But yeah, no, I agree. I think we're firmly in the cycles of history, scenario here, right? You can apply this in multiple places, and multiple people have. It's a pattern that develops across history and civilizations that are where we are. And so, while I think it's interesting that while the Biden administration is trying to use the military as normal, and then obviously making plans to probably use the military as not normal, or is it increasing or it believes it's increasingly in a situation where it will need to use the military in situations it does not normally use them, it may be setting up a situation where successors will maybe go down paths that even they were not prepared for and would not have wanted, but are basically laying the groundwork for.
Yeah, it's a concern. And it's one when you start to push away from loyalty to the state to loyalty to the individual, there's going to be somebody better than you at that game eventually. And they are going to be able to influence in such a way that is not necessarily to the betterment of the state.
Yeah, and obviously we also know, like you were saying before, we're in this situation where signaling victimhood and weakness has been a currency for so long that it seems like it's the only currency that most of our leaders know how to spend.
And believe it.
Yeah,
it's no longer a show to them.
Yeah, that's the thing. Really, they've drank their own Kool-Aid. You're not supposed to believe the noble lie as the ruler. Right, like the key to the noble lie is you're supposed to tell it to the plebs. You're supposed to preach it to the other people, but you're supposed to know how things actually work. Right, and so we're in a really dangerous situation where, I've talked a lot about Machiavelli's and Plato's foxes versus lions, and your lions are the very patriotic and strong leadership, and your foxes are more the leadership of cunning and duplicity. And it's been a really good time for foxes for a very long time. But the problem is that the incentives for our foxes have become so perverse that they've literally, rather than, normally the problem with the fox is that they aren't really capable of strong leadership and managing kind of, violence and war and those kind of things. But they act like they can. Now the danger is almost that they don't even have that capacity anymore, where they've abandoned even the pretext of having the ability to manage, kind of the military or the safety or the security apparatus. And so they're kind of handing it all off, if that makes sense. They're kind of, you've got these professional managerial class people, these PMCs in charge of the military, and they're telling the kind of the Fox politicians, kind of the soft, politicians who use sympathy and weakness as kind of their power. They're telling them, we can manage these people for you, right? We can keep them under control. We can make them loyal to you. But at some point that breaks, right? Like at some point, someone
What
who can
happens when
actually,
you have an ambitious individual in those
yes,
positions who is a little more clever?
yeah, what happens when there's somebody who can actually handle this kind of thing, and this is all just ripe for the picking, right? There's been nothing but weak, cowardly people, and you can, as long as you stack the incentive structure, as long as you invert the natural hierarchy enough, for a while you can get away with this, right? Like that's the Soviet Union, right? Like if you flip this whole pyramid long enough, you can run it for a while, but eventually it breaks down. Like you only fight reality so long, and there's only so long you can lead a people through weakness. There's only so long you can cower in a corner in fear and expect that to gain you points rather than lose them for you. And I think that time is coming eventually.
I mean, not only do they, it's again, I think most politicians in power see the military as a necessary evil at best, but they're, just for the events of January 6th, I think it's very clear that they're believing their own narratives. They're believing their own noble lie, and it's that was an interesting little side note to that whole situation, where you have people, politicians publicly announcing how scared or how concerned they were by these people who came into the Capitol building, and how brave they are for dealing with the situation in such a way that that they kept their dignity intact, and they were underneath the tables and allowed the security personnel to deal with the situation effectively. When you, as a politician, you literally realize the only thing between you and a relatively bad end is a dude with a pistol, can you not at least see the irony of the situation, or at least how fragile your power truly is? I mean, to quote Game of Thrones, one of my favorite scenes is Cersei and Littlefinger talking to each other, and Littlefinger's attempting to blackmail Cersei with knowledge, and then she turns around and almost slits his throat to say to him, "Power is power."
Yeah, he says knowledge is power, and she stops, and then she orders the guards to hold him, at sword point, tells him to cut his throat, then changes her mind and has this, the soldiers basically like dance or whatever. And yeah, then she's like, no, power is power. And yeah, that's something that is easily forgotten when we've been building this castle of sand for so long. It's a very impressive castle. There's a lot of sand involved, and it can do a lot of things, but eventually the tide comes back in,
And that's a simple truth, a simple fact that I think many people in positions of power have forgotten. I don't think all of them have, but I think many of those people have forgotten or choose not to acknowledge it. But as they keep plucking away those safety valves between them and violent power, I think it's a dangerous game that they play.
Yeah, and this is always the thing. This is a relationship I'm fascinated with, probably too fascinated with, but it's something that every time I see it, every time I read about it, it strikes me as, we have to abstract to kind of grow. And so we have to move further and further away from basic reality to generate kind of the fantastic things that humanity does. But as we do that at every step, we lose touch with kind of the core truth and the core reality. And we can make really fantastic and amazing things, but we're always building this Tower of Babel, as we attempt to become more than we are. And at some point, there's always that point in the civilizational cycle where just it becomes too much. The tower weighs too much, and all of a sudden, this edifice that we've built up, kind of try and manipulate reality and deny basic truths. It just comes crumbling down. And you can really feel the weight and the groan as kind of our civilization kind of lurches that direction, as so many people just don't have basic. I was struck by this recently. I saw someone, someone who had never really been hit before got hit, and they just. It's so often that people have just not ever been subjected to real physical violence, especially in kind of these advanced Western countries, and they just don't understand it. You see this all the time with like the Antifa kids, right? Like they get out in the streets and they think that, excuse me, they think that if they put on a mask and have a plastic shield or something, that they're Captain America, and then they run into the first guy who lifts weights and hits them hard, and they just reality. A lot of butter soft kids get reality checks real quick in these situations, and that doesn't just play up to stupid college kids and Antifa. Like that works all the way up to, I think, the halls of power. Like there's just a lot of people who are very disconnected from like what actually generates true political power, because the advantage has been manipulation and control of information, and we've adapted to all those things for so long that they've kind of atrophied all of the muscles that would allow them to exercise real, true core power. And when they finally see it, it's going to be a very rude awakening.
Yes, it is. It's not a fact about humanity that you can forget forever without peril.
Yeah, so guys, we're getting close to wrapping up. So if you want to put in a question, feel free to do so. Obviously, we'll get to super chats first, but we'll take a few questions before we call it quits for sure. But yeah, I think it's definitely interesting that as our leadership is doing the exact thing they think they need to secure their power, they might be setting themselves up for a whole world of hurt that they just couldn't imagine, if someone comes down the line who can really command that kind of loyalty from people who are now made accustomed to being personally loyal to an individual as opposed to the Constitution or to the idea of America.
I don't think it's their intention, but again, I think it's exactly where we're going.
All right, so let's see. General Guy says, can the U.S. still be considered one country? So, I mean, I don't think it has been for a while. I think that actually, in many ways, the U.S. has very rarely been one country. We are a very large empire, really. Even before we went overseas, and even before we really started acquiring land outside of the contiguous United States. Really, what does somebody in California in the 1870s have in common with someone in Louisiana or in Massachusetts? Almost nothing, right? Just the geographical size of America has always lent us to some really extreme subcultures. Again, as someone who has raced crawfish in Louisiana, let me tell you, like, there's some weird subcultures out there. And so I think really what we look at when we look at the uniformity of American culture is the aberration. We kind of had that post World War II coming together. Everybody went to war. Everybody had a very similar experience across the country of going to war and coming back. You had the introduction of true mass media with widespread TV ownership and movies, to the point where newspapers were getting us there, but now everybody was seeing the same pieces of culture. And so for a very brief amount of time, it looked like the kind of the e pluribus unum, the from many one, was going to be a real thing. Like we could actually do it. And then I think it kind of fell down. I think that as we kind of came out of that age, we're seeing America revert more back to what it has been, as opposed to move away from something it always was.
Yeah, it's not since the 13. I mean, even when we just had the 13 colonies, the individuals of those 13 colonies saw themselves as representative of their state or of their colony, and it's always been a patchwork type situation. where we've had multiple cultures in the United States and multiple outlooks that have all meshed together under the banner of the United States. But I would argue in some ways we've never been one country. We've been a patchwork of multiple countries that are united by a few common threads. And it's worked for a long time.
Yeah, I think when you had a government that allowed for the amount of regionalism that we had originally, I mean, I'll be the first person to say that federalism was kind of doomed from the beginning, but it worked for a while, right? It was functional for a while in that it let some people who probably should have been 3 to 4 separate countries function together because they had the amount of regional autonomy necessary for that to happen. But as kind of we've seen the totalization of and hegemony of the culture kind of reach across the country, I think you're seeing those stress fractures, where people who really do live totally different lives aren't really interchangeable, and it doesn't quite work that way.
Yeah, the tightening on the grip of culture in the United States is not a good thing, and it's cracking the United States.
Definitely. So I see. I'm not really. I'm going to be honest, guys. I'm not the in-depth foreign policy Middle Eastern guy. So I really don't have a good answer for you there, Cole H. I don't know. I know Ostrakon is familiar with the military nuts and bolts, but I don't know. Do you have any more information on kind of those factions inside the Syrian military?
I will do my research and get back to you on this question, sir.
Okay.
Because this is a very, very specific question, and I do not want to give you an uninformed answer. It's a good question. It's just not one I'm prepared to answer at this time, just because I would have to do a lot of research.
Yeah, I'm certainly your guy for minutia when it comes to obscure portions of political philosophy, but I don't think I'm your guy for regional factions of Syrian militants.
Yep.
All right, Luis Gonzalez, opinions on the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset. So yeah, this is an interesting one. The World Economic Forum, I thought about bringing this on this week so we can talk about it real quick. The World Economic Forum had a tweet this week saying that lockdowns were saving cities across the world. They're improving cities across the world. And this is, the Economic Forum has stepped in it a lot. And it's interesting because it's weird. Like the Economic Forum kind of is like the most obvious and upfront like Illuminati shill, right? Like I'm obviously not a guy who's big on the Illuminati story, but man, if there's somebody who's trying to make it clear that the Illuminati exists, it's probably the World Economic Forum, because they do come out in the open with things like the Great Reset, which is very clearly like a multinational plan to manipulate the world's economy and populations through things like environmental policy and education of those kind of things. You can see that slogan. There's a great from Beefbog, friend of the show, Beefbog from the Good Old Boys. He had a great tweet where he just searched up like the Great Reset, and you could at the same time from the same like advertised Google results see the World Economic Forum's own advertisement of the Great Reset, like Justin Trudeau saying we're going to have the Great Reset, and then a article from MSNBC saying the Great Reset is a conspiracy theory, like all in the same advertised research results. So it's a really weird thing, because if you were trying to make a cartoonishly evil person the head of a multinational oligarchy, Klaus Schwab would be it. Like he looks like the villain from like Sonic the Hedgehog or something. Like he looks like he should be running some kind of small evil empire in a cartoon. And they say things that are obviously like super, dystopian and like very, it's very clumsy. And so I don't know, like that. I really don't know what to think about the World Economic Forum, because they're so clumsy and goofy and obvious as to make me think that it's not really a serious thing. But at the same time, maybe the global leadership has just degenerated to that point, or they've gotten so lazy that they act that way and they can't just be bothered. I mean, this is why I tend towards the cathedral model, because the people in charge are so often like obviously and embarrassingly incompetent about some of these things that it feels like it has to be like more of a general consensus moving in a awkward direction rather than a massive conspiracy. But the existence of the World Economic Forum seems to point the other direction. I don't know. It's pretty tough for me to figure out on that one. I don't know if you have any thoughts on the Great Reset.
No, sorry. This is again more your forte than mine.
Yeah, this is the interesting thing about them is, they have this this slogan, "Build Back Better," and you might be familiar with that because it was Boris Johnson's campaign slogan.
I am familiar with that, and
it was also Joe Biden's.
I mean, I guess you can take the COVID-19 crisis, and it's really wrecked the economy, and I guess that's an opportunity to rebuild the economy in a new way. But it's not an engine you can turn on and off, and I really don't see how they're going to improve the situation in any meaningful way that's going to have long-term effects. Maybe it's just like it's the Great Reset is just another word for the New Deal in a way, but I don't know how it's going to have any long-term positive effects on the country.
Yeah, and this is a good one. Schwab literally dresses like the Vorlons from Babylon 5. Yes, he does. Yes, he does. He absolutely does.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, no, it's like I said, he's cartoonishly evil. Like it's like you expect him to spin around in a chair and be stroking a hairless cat while explaining how he's going to kill James Bond. That's really what you expect from him whenever he's making a presentation. So, like I said, I really don't know what to think. We're in a weird time where these people are so confident in what they're doing, but at the same time also seem to have become so inept. And so it's this weird flex where like they have more power than they've ever had before. They have more hegemony than they've ever had before. Their control is more total, more complete, and more secure than it's probably ever been. And they seem to, at the same time, feel the need to push it more and more out into the front, make it more and more obvious, be more and more clumsy about it. And I just don't know if that's a natural degeneration, if that's just your kind of your violinism at play, if that's just your natural, or if it just you get sloppy and you don't have to be as clever, and so they're not, or if it really if I don't know. Like I said, it's hard for me to read at this point. The one thing I know for sure is, like I said, I think they are setting themselves up long term to be easy pickings for someone who, like we were talking about, is able to take control of these things. Because the funny thing about what these people are doing is, in many ways, they're setting up the tools that can make their demise even easier. The things like, I think of the GameStop stocks, right? Where, they set up this Robinhood app so they can basically like sell penny stocks to people. They can make more and more money off the plebs through the, kind of financial markets. And what that turns into is then a weapon for the people to crush the hedge funds when they work together to destroy them. So by opening up these lines of communication and this ability to reach deep into the populace and manipulate and control everything, you're also building the kind of the method of your own destruction. I'm thinking of, and it's not exactly right, but a lot of people say, one of the reasons the Roman Empire ends up falling so quickly is, the roads, the very roads that enable the empire to exist are the roads the barbarians take through to sweep out the empire. And so many of the things that they're setting up to, kind of gain this final inch of total control are also the things that make it feels to me makes it easier for them to fall in the end.
Yeah, that they're getting rid of the two-party system, but but they never needed to, right? They were effective as they were, but they've gone out of their way to tighten their grip on both politics and culture when they need to have that safety valve in place. And it's because I think the issue is you got this next generation of liberal politicians who learned the lessons without understanding why they were in place to begin with. Right? This generation is less intelligent, or at least less savvy than previous generations.
Yeah, I mean, I've make this reference pretty often. The kind of the meme of strong men make good times make weak men make hard times. And while that's true often of what we think of as kind of the right wing, that's true of the left wing too, right? Like the ease at which they wield the power makes them lazy, and it makes them less practiced at the things that were is necessary to upkeep. The atrophy, the entropy works against them too. That's why Cthulhu swims left. There's always another crop of young, hungry, power-hungry people ready to come in and knock out whatever few restraints you were holding on people to gain additional power, which just lays the apparatus bare even further. So thank you for the super chat, Sam153. What's the biggest misstep so far that the current Biden regime has committed?
I think long term, it's exactly what we discussed today, but I don't know if you've got more of a short term thing that they've done that's a misstep.
Yeah, so long term, I think you're right. I think long term, that's definitely they're setting up, they're planting the seeds of their own destruction there, for sure. Short term, that's a good question. There's a couple of things that come to mind. Obviously, the check going from $2,000 to $1,400. To who knows if this thing's ever getting passed. The general sweeping of the economic left under the rug immediately as they enter the administration, I think is a mistake on their part. I know they were never really going to deliver for these people, but I thought they were going to string them along a little further. You know what I mean? Especially when you only get a Trump once in a blue moon, right? Like Nixon is their last Trump, really, where they can really exploit that as like, ooh, here's the scary thing coming down the pipe. And if you don't have that, then it's hard to sell the economic left on constantly electing your center-left candidates. Now, don't get me wrong, Bernie Sanders is a joke. He's a joke of a human being. He's a coward who immediately abandoned his people the minute there was any pushback from the party. He let them cheat and push him out of office, and he's no real threat to them anymore. But just as there is the possibility of a Caesar-like figure through the military, there is the possibility that at some point someone really plays the economic game, right? Or even more, that when they're leaving people out to dry like that, it really gives possibly the right the opportunity, because you see more and more of the Tucker Carlson portion of the right wing wanting to step in and kind of capture some of the economic left's positions. I don't think that's something that's going to happen anytime super in the near future, but I do think it's an unnecessary kind of opportunity they're leaving on the table for people to leverage power away from them. Because if you lose the economic left, all you're held together with at that point is your kind of racial hierarchy, social justice coalition, and that thing's a ticking time bomb.
Yeah, that is definitely taking the dragon by the tail and waving it around. You cannot just have your cultural hegemony without some sort of economic hegemony tied to it. You're really playing with fire there, and they don't. Yeah, but they've been doing it for so long. I think they don't realize it.
Well, and it's to the point where the left used to be about labor unions and that kind of thing. So even though they were offering redistribution, that kind of thing, they also still had a basis of like work and economic plans, right? Like there was still a way for people to make money. There was still jobs in the future. Sure, you were fighting for jobs that, maybe being made obsolete by technology, but they were at least giving a nod towards those positions. Now they're just importing large amounts of labor that's going to doom those jobs. They're phasing many of them out, and their answer never seems to be anything besides like, we'll just make green energy jobs, right? Like this was their last their last version of learn to code was, you can retrain to become a solar panel engineer. This is we'll make work jobs on green energy, and that's going to be the future. That's literally the only thing I see them talking about in like a new economic direction. There's only so many people who can be cultural commissars, right? Like you can only put so many people with gender studies degrees into HR departments as a kind of political favor to keep the party running. At some point,
somebody's got to weld the pipes. Somebody's got to be able to build the structures. Somebody's got to be able to take out the garbage.
Yeah, and the only thing that they seem to be offering these people is just extended unemployment and higher minimum wage working at Costco. And it's like, you if you're not able to sell anyone a future beyond like your basic healthcare needs, maybe, which I still don't think they're going to do, but that's what they're trying to sell people. If the only future you're selling people is, look, you'll actually be able to go to a doctor sometimes and we'll pay you off on unemployment, like that's a horrible future. And that's not something that's going to animate people in the long run. When you were talking about keeping manufacturing jobs here and raising wages and, redistributing, to people, it's not something that I think had a realistic chance of happening, but at least it was something that had a narrative that made sense into the future in some way. If you completely abandon that, then you really are just completely riding on this, we will manipulate the social hierarchy in a way where you can basically crush your neighbor. And that's all they're selling. There's no future involved in that. There's no building of the economy. There's no building of families. There's no building of futures. It's just, well, if you get the right credentials and you vote for the right people, we'll allow you to like basically, piss on your neighbor, and that's going to have to be enough. I don't know how it's valuable for them now. I don't know how long you can sell that into the future.
Yeah, it's it's not a narrative that I personally buy into. I think I've been pretty adamant about just finding my 2 to 5 acres and building a house on it, and that's definitely not what they're selling on the economic left. They're not selling any sort of stability of any kind. They're just, you can always get one up on your neighbor, but as long as you don't bother the elites, which is not a long-term effective goal.
Yeah, so from JNS77, would a culturally reactionary and economically moderately socialist movement be more sustainable versus the neoliberal woke monsters? So I think you are going to see, I think we have a bad definition of socialism in the United States, probably first and foremost. At this point, the definitions we have are basically socialism is any attempt to in any way restrict any form of economic activity. And that's a problem because even if you just want to run a mildly nationalist government, nothing extreme, just a very mildly nationalist government, you're going to need to restrict the ability of companies to outsource workers overseas, bring foreign labor in. You're going to need to be able to control some level of imports and exports. You might need to stop the ability of these giant oligarchies like Amazon and Google from completely dominating and shutting down small competition, medium-sized competition. You're going to have to do that, and that's stuff that the right's going to need to become comfortable with. And you're seeing again there is an increasing understanding of that. I think this week, Amazon announced that it was going to start like basically just any book it found offensive, and it's going to, obviously the books are going to be conservative and right-wing books. It's just going to stop selling. And because of the total control of the market that Amazon has, that means publishers are basically just going to stop publishing a lot of those books. And so if the right has any hope of surviving, it's going to need to make those moves, and it's not going to be socialism. That's not what socialism is. Marxism is a very specific set of like who owns the means of production. It's not just any restriction on the economy, and I think that a right that is offering that is both necessary and that's where it's going to go. But I also don't think you should expect a large Democrat, and here I'm talking about small d, democratic movement, a populist movement, to actually make those things a reality. At some point, an elite's going to come by and realize there's a lot of power on the table. It's someone who's out of power, who doesn't have control over the wider country, who isn't able to generate power elsewhere, is going to realize that there's a large power base there, the way that Donald Trump did. And actually convert it. But I think it's going to be a while before that happens. And I wouldn't expect just small corrections inside, like say the Republican Party or the conservative movement, are not going to get this done. So don't expect like a change in economic policy on the right to signal like the return of a mass movement to unseat the neoliberal kind of globalists kind of people.
Let's answer this question from Bolero here.
Do you think the military, instead of dismantling red-blooded dismissing red-blooded Americans, the new purges will deploy them overseas more often and keep the Praetorian transgender battalions stateside?
Well, I get that you're being a little facetious there. And that's pretty funny. I think that's already the case in a lot of ways. The answer is yes. What you're having is obviously your combat troops are going to be spending more time overseas deployed conducting missions, and your troops that are more involved with logistics and intelligence and things like this are more predominantly stateside. So it's not that they will do this. I think this is just pretty much business as normal. The frivolities of leftist politics don't last long in a combat situation.
Yeah, and we were definitely talking about this when we were talking about how the majority of people who would oppose the cathedral are in combat arms, and that's why they need to start looking at them. Is they do normally keep them overseas. The constant deployment is a feature, not a bug. But at the same time, if they are planning to bring them back in case of emergency, they want to make sure that it's not the combat arms units are not full of people who are going to disagree with their policy decisions if they were to turn the efforts of the military in a more domestic area. And so I think that's why it's necessary for them to start doing those extra steps, because it used to be that they could just keep them deployed, but I don't know if that works for them in the long run if they have other plans for the military.
Yep, I agree.
All right, guys. Well, I think that's most of the questions, so we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. As always, we really appreciate everybody for coming by. We really appreciate the super chat, and if anybody is not subscribed to the channel, please go ahead and do so. Also, I've had a Rumble channel going for a little bit, but the problem with the Rumble channel is like the live streams don't go over there. I went ahead and moved over to Odyssey. A lot of people are moving over to Odyssey, and apparently, again, I'm not a tech guy, so I can't explain to you why it's more secure and much more hard to take down. I understand it operates on the blockchain, but outside of that, I really don't know what the guts of that are. But I've been told that is much more difficult to be taken down, that kind of thing. And the really nice thing is it automatically spools everything that goes up on the YouTube channel and takes it over to the Odyssey channel. So anything you watch here, if you don't get to watch the stream live, it does go over to Odyssey basically right after it's done processing on YouTube. So if you want to follow me somewhere besides YouTube, and I highly suggest, even if you prefer to watch on YouTube, you at least subscribe to one of these alternative sources or services, because at some point, they probably will remove most of the of the content that's not like video games and NBC and ABC News off of YouTube. If you want makeup tutorials, you'll probably be able to watch YouTube. But if you want to watch anything else, you'll probably have to go elsewhere. And so I'll be on YouTube. I'm not planning to go anywhere. But if you want to have an alternative platform to watch on, I encourage you to follow the link over to Odyssey and go ahead and follow that channel so that you've got that backup option. But thanks again to Ostrakon for coming on. If you want to sub for the channel, check below. Twitter links, Subscribestar, the merch store for the show. All that stuff is in the links below. And as always, guys, thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.